Hello, lovelies. You know what time it is. Ha! Get into it. Yes! Hello, my lovelies. How are you today? It is story time with Chris, and genuinely speaking, it doesn't feel like a Monday today. And of course, wearing my hair ribbon, orange. It's the color of determination. It's the color of the universe's love. At least that's what one of my old church mothers used to teach me. She said, she would always say that orange is the color of God's love. And I think that's rather fitting, because orange is my favorite color. Now, you didn't come to hear me blather, you came to hear a story. And as always, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max or relax and chillaxing time, in between time, mean time, scheme time, summertime, break time, CP time, any time that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of fantasy, magic, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. So this next message is specifically for the adults that watch this. I actually am going to be starting a late night version of Storytime with Chris. I'm only going to do it twice a week because I already do Storytime 5 days a week, because I have Monday and Wednesday with you all, and then I have Tuesday and Thursday with my other group, and then I have Sundays. So I believe the book that I'm going to choose is more than likely it's a toss-up between The Dark Tower by Stephen King, Volume 1, or John Grisham's The Rainmaker, which is one of my favorite books growing up. I read that when I was a freshman in high school. Changed my life. The movie, not so much. And anybody that's seen the movie probably raves about it, but I definitely prefer the book because I am a hopeless bookworm, and that's fine. But we're back with the remarkable journey of Prince Jen, and we have met a new character named Chincho, who has been gifted a new set of paintbrushes and bristles and pigments. So pigments is to refer to a color or a shading. That terminology is used within the makeup world as well as in costume and design. So when you hear the term pigment, children, it typically talks about paint and what he's trying to draw. And he's actually a master painter. And we're going to find out how that goes with his new set of brushes. And actually, we only have 10 chapters left. We're almost done. We probably will be done in 3 weeks. Well, no, 2 weeks. Give it 2 weeks. We can make that happen. Chapter 21. The Tale of the Tiger's Paintbrush. Chincho the painter was a good-natured, easygoing sort. He liked his food and drink, though as often as not he did without either. Not because he suffered any lack of customers. He was in fact a most excellent artist, and many who saw his pictures wished eagerly to buy them. To Chincho, however, parting with one of his landscapes was like having a tooth pulled. Sometimes, of course, he was obliged to do so when he needed a few strings of cash to keep body and soul, together, although usually he spent the money on paper and paint. On the other hand, out of sudden impulse or foolish whim, he was just as likely to give away one of his pictures to a passer-by who wistfully admired but could ill afford to purchase it. For the rest, he was a little absent-minded, his head so filled with colors and shapes that he lost track of time. Forgot to wash his face or change his clothes. With his collapsing umbrella, his felt cap, his bespattered trousers flapping around his ankles, he became a familiar sight in towns and villages when he stopped in the course of his wanderings. Children tagged after him, fascinated to peer over his shoulder as he worked. Local officials, however, felt more comfortable after he left. Now, with the sandalwood box on the table in front of him, paying no attention to the rejoicing villagers crowding the inn, Chincho gleefully scrutinized his gift. As an artist, he had immediately recognized the excellence of the materials, but he studied them again to confirm his first opinion. He picked up the stick of black ink and rolled it around in his fingers. He sniffed at it, even tasted it, and licked his lips as if it were some delicious morsel. Marvelous, Chincho said to himself. Perfect. No question, this ink's made from the ashes of pine trees on the south slope of Mount Lu. The very best. Next, he turned his attention to the inkstone with its shallow little basin for water at one end and its flat surface for grinding the solid ink at the other. The stone was fine-grained, flawless, and in color, an unusually reddish gray. Chincho rubbed his thumb over it lovingly and shook his head in amazement. Here's a treasure in itself. I've heard of stones like this. They come only from one place, a grotto in Mount Wushang. I never believed they were more than legend, yet I have one right in my hand. chuckling over his good fortune, blessing the stranger he had fondly nicknamed Honorable Ragbag, the painter picked up the last object in the box, a paintbrush with a long bamboo handle. This is odd. Chincho squinted at the brush hairs, tested them on the palm of his hand and the tip of his nose. Soft? Firm? Both at once? What's it made of? Not rabbit fur, not wolf fur, not mouse whiskers. The painter could not restrain himself another moment. He called the landlord for a cup of water, poured a little into the basin of the inkstone, then carefully rubbed the tip of the ink stick against the grinding surface. No matter how much he rubbed, the stick showed no trace of wear. At this rate, he said to himself, it will last forever. One stick and ink enough for the rest of my life. That's frugality for you, which is one of my favorite words. So frugality comes from the word frugal. Frugal is to mean someone who does not, someone who's very, not necessarily put together, but somebody that doesn't require pomp and circumstance. Like, being frugal is being like shrewd with your money, being careful, being very self-sustaining but not over the top. Like, you being frugal, let's give a good example of that. There have been times where I could have spent hundreds of dollars on video games and manga, but I use that money to go get groceries. There are plenty of times when I want to wear a great big outfit with a huge coat, and instead I wear a small jacket with light lapels and so on. And just being frugal is just being modest. It's a fancy way of saying that. And I love my modesty. He pulled out a sheet of paper, moistening the brush, rolling the tip in the ink he had ground. He had made a couple of trial strokes. As he did, a thrill began at the tip of his toes, raced to his arm, his hand, his fingers. The sensation turned him giddy. He glanced at the paper. His jaw dropped. The brush strokes were not black. They were bright vermilion. I'd have sworn that ink was black, Chincho murmured. Was I mistaken? Yes, no doubt. The light's dim here. He made a few more brush strokes. They were no longer vermilion, but jade green. Chincho put down the brush and rubbed his chin. What's happening here? That inkstone's black as night, through and through. What's doing it? The stone? The brush? No matter. Let's have another go. Chincho dabbed at the paper, which was soon covered with streaks of bright orange, red, and blue. Anyone else might have grown alarmed or frightened at such an uncanny happening, but Chincho... I have a furry friend here, and she's awesome. She doesn't bother me at all, because it means I have an attentive audience. Where was I? But Chincho enjoyed surprises, mysteries, and extraordinary events, and so he laughed with delight to find himself owner of these remarkable materials. Well, old fellow, he said to himself, you've come into something you never expected and probably better than you deserve. Let's try something else. Those are marvelous colors. But what if I wanted a sort of lilac purple green with a reddish cast? No sooner did Chincho imagine such a hue that it flowed from his brush. He quickly discovered that he needed only envision whatever shade he wanted, and there it was, from brush to paper. That's what I call convenient and efficient, exclaimed the joyous Chincho. No more paint pots and a dozen different pigments. Here's everything all at once. With that, he clapped his felt hat firmly on his head, seized a handful of papers, packed up the box, and hurried out of the inn. He ran all the way to the stream we had first met Ragbag. There he settled himself, ignoring the weather, forgetting to put up his umbrella, and worked happily, letting the brush go as it wished, hardly glancing at what he was doing. It was dusk, and the light had faded before he could make himself leave off, but the picture was finished. Better than anything he had ever painted. Chincho laughed and slapped his leg. Oh boy, he told himself, keep on like this and you might even do something worthwhile. He went back to his room at the inn, excited by his wonderful new possessions. He forgot to eat his dinner and barely slept that night, eager to start another picture. Which is honestly a gift I wish I had. And trust me, y'all, I know what you're gonna say. Chris, practice makes perfect. And I've tried. I'm 32 years old, and I don't look a day over 18. And let me tell you something. Ever since I was 14, I've been trying to learn how to draw and paint. I've looked up instruction manuals. I've been to art classes. I've done videos on YouTube. I can't draw to save my life. I can't sketch. I can't paint. The closest thing I've ever been able to do is charcoal paint. And somebody said, hey, Chris, draw me a snake. It was a baguette with olives for eyes. That's what my art teacher told me when I was sophomore in high school. I can't draw to save my life. But what I am blessed with is that I can write and bring these characters to life with my written word and spoken word. So what I lack in that department, I excel at other things. And that's the beauty of being you, children, is that it's okay to be different and not have mastery over all skills. Because if you did that, there'd be nothing more or new to learn. Even at this age, I am always learning. You never stop learning, and you can never stop learning and excelling at more knowledge from other people. Saying all that to say, I suck at drawing. It's terrible. Where was I? Oh, goodness, I went to the other side. There. Next morning, and for several days hereafter, Chincho went into the countryside looking for scenes to paint. Each landscape that took shape under his hand delighted him more than the one before. It snowed heavily on a certain morning. Chincho usually paid no mind to bad weather. That day, the wind blew so sharply and the snow piled up so deeply that he decided to stay in his room. Nevertheless, his fingers itched to take up the brush. Ordinarily, he painted outdoors according to whatever vista caught his eye. This time, he thought to do something else. Why not make up my own landscape? I'll paint whatever pops into my head and strikes my fancy. Taking one of his largest sheets of paper, he set about painting hills and valleys and forests and streams, adding glens and lakes wherever it pleased him. He painted rolling meadows he had never seen, and bright banks of flowers he invented as he went along, and clouds of fantastic shapes all drenched in sunlight, with a couple of rainbows added for good measure. What this may be, I've no idea, Chincho said when he finished. He blinked happily at the picture. All I know is I've astonished myself. That's something that'll never happen before. Chincho could not take his eyes from his handiwork. He peered at it from every angle, first from a distance, then so close he bumped his nose. But I didn't know better, he said. I'd swear I could smell those flowers. In fact, if I hadn't painted them, I believe I could pick one. He reached out, pretending to pick a blossom. Next thing he knew, the flower lay in his hand. Chincho gaped at it. He swallowed hard, then grinned and shook his head. What have you done, you foolish fellow? Is go to sleep on your feet. You're having a dream, a marvelous one, but that's all it is. He pinched himself, rubbed his eyes, soaked his head in a basin of water, paced back and forth. The flower was still where he had set it on the table. Fragrance filled the room. I'm wide awake, no question about it, he added, and he admitted he went and looked again to the picture. That being the case, let's examine this reasonably. It seems I've put my hand into it. What, for example, if I did this? Chincho poked his head into the painted landscape. Indeed, he could look around him at the trees and lakes. The sunshine dazzled and warmed him. He sniffed the fragrant air. He heard the rush of a waterfall somewhere in the distance. This is definitely out of the ordinary, Chincho murmured, pulling back his head. Dare I explore a little further? With that, Chincho plucked up his courage and stepped all the way into the picture. He was not certain how he did it. The painting was large, but far from as large as the artist himself. Yet he must have grown spacious enough to take him in, for there he was, standing knee-deep in the soft grass of a meadow. So far, so good, he said. But now I've gone in. How do I get out? He answered his own question by easily stepping back into the room. His first apprehension gave way to delight as he discovered that he could walk in and out of the paintings as often as he pleased. With each venture into the landscape, Chincho found himself becoming all the more comfortable and confident. It's quite amazing, hard to believe, Chincho remarked, but I suppose one can get used to anything, including miracles. A fascinating thought sprang to mind. What, he wondered, lay beyond the fields and forest and across the valleys? I've no idea what's there, he said, which is the best reason to go and find out. Chinchou picked up the sandalwood box and a sheet of paper in case he found some especially attractive scene. Stepping into the landscape, he set off eagerly along a gentle path that opened at his feet. He soon came to a high-arched bridge over a stream lined with willows. The view so charmed him that he spread his paper and paint and began to paint once more. He stopped in the middle of a brushstroke. He had the impression of being watched. When he turned around, he saw that his impression wasn't correct. Sitting on his haunches, observing him through a pair of orange eyes, was an enormous tiger. "Hello, Chinchou." The tiger padded toward him, stripes rippling at every fluid pace. "My name is Lao Hu. I've been expecting you." "A pleasure to make your acquaintance," replied Chinchou, having by now grown accustomed to marvelous happenings. The arrival of a tiger did not unsettle him too much, especially since the big animal had addressed him in a friendly tone. "However, I can't truthfully say I was expecting you." "You must have, whether you knew it or not," Lao Hu said. "Otherwise I wouldn't be here." "Ah, I see. You've been using my brush." "Yours?" "My hairs," Lao Hu said. "From the tip of my tail, I hope it pleases you." "A remarkable brush," Chinchou said. "I'd go so far as to call it miraculous." "From the tip of your tail?" "Yes, but in this case I'm a little puzzled. I hope you don't mind my asking. But if you weren't here until I painted this picture, where were you before I painted it? If you were someplace else, how did you get here? And who plucked out those hairs in the first place?" "Why concern yourself with such details?" Lao Hu yawned enormously. "It's a tedious, boring matter you wouldn't understand to begin with. Let me just say this. You are not the first to paint such a picture, nor the last. Many have done still finer work, and you're certainly not the first to use my brush." "Tell me then," Chinchou said, "can others find the way into my picture? A question of privacy, you understand?" "Of course they can," replied Lao Hu. "It's your painting, but now that you've done it, it's open to anybody who cares to enter. But leave that idle speculation and nitpicking to scholars who enjoy such occupation." Oh, that was a bit abrupt. I'm pretty sure one of my guardian angels is trying to get my attention. Well, actually, he's right behind me. Hi, Raphael. How's it going? Let's see. "You've hardly seen the smallest part of all this." Lao Hu motioned around him with his long tail. "So let me show you a little for a start. Climb on my back." Chinchou gladly accepted the tiger's invitation. Lao Hu sprang across the stream in one mighty leap. Chinchou clamped his legs around the tiger's flanks and his arms around Lao Hu's powerful neck. The tiger sped across meadows, through forests, up and down hills. Chinchou glimpsed garden pavilions, farmhouses, towns and villages, sailboats on rivers, birds in the air, fish leaping in brooks, animals of every kind. Some of what he saw looked vaguely familiar, the rest altogether strange and fascinating. Lao Hu promised they would continue their explorations and carry the painter back to where they had started. Oh, hi, friend. Thank you for watching. As easily as he stepped into the painting, Chinchou stepped into the room. Lao Hu followed, much to the surprise and delight of the painter, who was reluctant to part from his new companion. "I go wherever I please," Lao Hu replied when Chinchou asked about this. "Just as you can." "Can other people see you?" asked Chinchou, wondering what his landlord might say if he came into the room and found a tiger. "Of course they can," Lao Hu said. "I may be a magical tiger, but I'm not an invisible one." With that, Lao Hu curled up at the foot of Chinchou's bed. The tired but happy painter flung himself down and went to sleep, thinking that all in all, it had been an interesting day. Next morning, when the storm had passed, Chinchou packed his belongings and set off on his way again. Lao Hu had jumped back into the picture, which the artist had rolled up and carried under his arm. Once away from the village, Chinchou unrolled the painting. He saw no sign of Lao Hu. Dismayed, the artist extraneously called for him. The tiger appeared, and an instant later sprang out and padded alongside Chinchou. From then on, whenever he was sure they were unobserved, Chinchou summoned Lao Hu, and the two of them wandered together, the fondest of companions. When Chinchou stopped to paint some scene or other, the tiger would stretch out next to him, or disappear into the painting on some business of his own. Nevertheless, Chinchou had only to call his name and Lao Hu would appear immediately, and Chinchou always kept the painting beside him when he worked. As for his other paintings, thanks to the tiger's brush, the marvelous ink stick, and the grinding stone, they became better and better, as did Chinchou's reputation. Whenever he lodged in a town or city, he could expect a number of customers to come clamoring for his pictures. However, as always, he parted with few. Nor would he even consider selling his marvelous landscape, say that 3 times fast, no matter what price was offered. So more often than not would be purchasers left disappointed at being refused. Only once did Chinchou have a disagreeable encounter. In one town, a merchant came to inspect Chinchou's paintings, but as soon as he saw them, he shook his head in distaste.
What dreadful drabs are these?
He explained.
Not one suitable to put in my house. And this,
he pointed at the landscape where Lao Hu had prudently hidden himself out of sight.
Worst of all, an ugly, blotchy, ill-conceived scrawl. I've nightmares prettier than this.
Children, that is a prime example of what is called a hater. We don't hang out with them. We don't sit with them. We don't have lunch with haters. But you let your haters be your motivators, okay? And if they hating on you, you doing it right. Chinchou, glad to see the merchant stamp off, flung a few tart words after him. He was nonetheless puzzled. He called Lao Hu, who popped out instantly. Easily understood, Lao Hu said when Chinchou told him the merchant's opinion. As a painter, you should know this better than anyone. We see with eyes in our head, but see clearer with eyes of the heart. Some see beauty, some see ugliness. In both cases, what they see is a reflection of their own nature. I will repeat that line, actually. We see with eyes in our head, but see clearer with eyes of the heart. Some see beauty, some see ugliness. In both cases, what they see is a reflection of their own nature. And why did that stop? And it's because it's buffering. Only it would happen here. Only it would happen with Storytime. Thank you. Oh, now you're just being petty. Even so, replied Chinchou, a painting's a painting. Colors and shapes don't change, no matter who looks at them. True enough, said Lao Hu. Very well then. Let me put it to you this way. You can't please everybody. That, I suppose, Chinchou said, is a blessing. While Chinchou happily paints away with Lao Hu at his side, Jin is arriving at Chai Sang to learn what he has found there. Accompany him into the next chapter. And that is where we will end for today. As always, y'all, I really do appreciate when you come and view these. Thank you for the support. I will be uploading some, actually a lot of new chapters for story. Y'all know me. Y'all know my track record, okay? It's going to be like 15, 20 videos that are just going to drop. It's going to happen probably today or tomorrow. But as always, I love you all very, very much. And you go ahead and enjoy your day. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.